Hey there, citizens. Welcome to the podcast and an extra welcome to the very first episode of Window View, your one-stop podcast where I give you a rundown of games I've played both past and present. No filler, no bullshit, just me, a mic, and the game review. I'm your host, Jake, also known as Windowcov on Twitch. You may also know me in other places as Dr. Window. You may also know me from my other podcast, TCOIP, The Children of Industrial Prime, a dystopian, episodic cyberpunk drama that you can also find here on Spotify or wherever the hell you get your podcasts. Alright, so a little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong gamer. Started on the Atari 2600 and a black and white TV in my mom's kitchen, and here I am now, playing games on Twitch and making content and podcasts. It's pretty crazy. I am actually also recently disabled. I've been diagnosed with eosinophilic asthma, basically where my own lungs attack themselves. It's pretty crazy. I gotta get shots like every 2 weeks to keep it in check. And I also have IgG deficiency, immunoglobulin G deficiency. I basically don't have a working immune system anymore, so I can't really fight off colds, flus, fevers, stuff like that. So you can imagine how fun the era of COVID has been for my ass. So, during that time and just, being here at home, I turned to Twitch. At the suggestion of some of my closest friends, they recommend that I hop onto Twitch. Turns out I liked it, and, I started streaming, and here I am. It's been almost a year. And then recently, while I was playing Dead Space 2023 on air, I made the decision that why not make a review show based on games that I've either finished on Twitch or, that I just enjoy otherwise, or I just thought I want to chat about, and here's my outlet. And thus, my not-so-original concept for Window View was born. But, enough about me. Why not start talking about a recently released remake from EA, a remake of a classic that I've been streaming lately, and I actually just finished about, 2 days ago. Why not start with Dead Space 2023? So, Dead Space, right? Originally released October 14th, 2008 for PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. Dead Space was a game that made waves in the survival horror genre, especially during a time where the old classic Resident Evil decided to take even more of an action-based approach with Resident Evil 5. While Resident Evil 4 is still fantastic, it's also still a survival horror classic. It's still considered one of the greatest games of all time. Resident Evil 5 decided to go crazy. Tons of action, lots of boulder punching. And what we lost with Resident Evil 5 was that survival horror atmosphere and gameplay aspect. Once you introduce co-op, the fear kind of goes away. Silent Hill 5, Homecoming, also released in 2008 to mediocre reviews. Not terrible, but, not great either. And of course, Left 4 Dead also released that year, and while yes, that game is fantastic, it's still not survival horror as we know and love. It's a great game, lots of action, just amazing co-op. It just doesn't scratch that itch. Then some space engineer with a plasma cutter and a lack of dialogue arrived on the scene and really changed the game for action in a survival horror setting. I myself personally bought Dead Space probably the first week of release. I remember hitting up my local GameStop, trading some old games, counting up a whole bunch of change, and then buying it. I was probably about 23 years old. My God, I was 23 years old. I'm 37 now. Anyway, let's ignore that, past the Tylenol. I remember speeding home, getting some McDonald's, popped it in my 360, and I began playing immediately. Now, mind you, this was a time before installations. I was immediately blown away for the graphics at the time, and even more so at the environment. And whenever I'm asked about Dead Space, or I'm asked to describe it, I always say this game is what happens when you mix Doom, Alien, and Event Horizon. It's a perfect mix. A dark foreboding atmosphere, the claustrophobic feeling of the USG Ishimura, knowing there's absolutely no way out of that ship or anywhere to run. The game can be very intense just based on those few things alone. You throw in some RPG elements and choice jump scares and ambushes, and you're looking at stress around every corner. Now, I myself can really see comparing this game to Resident Evil 4. It has a lot of the same feel, over-the-shoulder camera, inventory and resource management, upgrades, in-game store, but sadly, no Resident Evil 4 merchant in Dead Space.
Welcome!
And I know every damn one of you out there that just heard that just smiled like an idiot. But, for what we lose in a fantastic side character such as the merchant in Resident Evil 4, we make up for in that we don't have to deal with Ashley being useless and screaming Leon every 5 seconds. So that's nice. But Dead Space is a game I always find myself coming back to over the years. More so than Resident Evil 4, personally. I'm a huge fan of sci-fi and all things dystopian, cyberpunk, and Dead Space's lo-fi sci-fi atmosphere that follows in the vein of Alien 1979 hits the mark for me. I'm reminded of Blade Runner as well, and the cyberpunk slogan of high-tech, low-life. Sure, we're a bunch of people floating around in space, but our technology is still gigantic and chunky, and that's what I'm looking for with my sci-fi. But enough of me gushing about this game. Let's do so in depth and more planned sections. Next up, gameplay. It's perfect. Thank you for listening. I'm kidding. The gameplay is just as engaging and refreshing as it was 15 years ago. It's solid, simple, to the point. Cut off their limbs. Now this can catch some folks off a little bit, being, coming from traditional survival horror games, being that a lot of us out there are programmed to go for headshots all the time. Within the first 15 minutes or so of gameplay, we're heaved into chaos, chased down a dark hallway, where we take an elevator to our first weapon, the plasma cutter. The first weapon we're given, the primary means to dispatch enemies in a game where you sever limbs all day, is given to you, and right off the bat, it's perfection. Sure, you get flamethrowers, plasma rifles, the rippers, and much more, but you can beat the entire game with just a plasma cutter. In fact, the original release even had an achievement for beating the game using only a plasma cutter called One Gun. And this achievement also makes a return in the 2023 entry as well under the same name. Nice callback, EA. I appreciate stuff like that. The care taken to make a game with as many guns and upgrades that it has, as many different kinds of enemies, the difficulty that it has, and to make sure that you can still beat the game with only one gun is a great feat in itself. Now, one of the things I was looking forward to the most in Dead Space 2023 once I heard about it was that Gunnar Wright makes a return to the role of Isaac Clarke. Originally, he was the voice actor, and also in Dead Space 2, he had more lines. He was also, the character was also modeled after him. But now, with modern technology, fully modeled and voiced by him. For years, I'd always wanted to actually see him make a return to the Dead Space franchise. And not only did we get that in spades, we got a ton of extra dialogue from him. We got extra backstory about him, his relationship with Nicole, his mother being a unitologist, and that entangles him more into the events of the game, once it kicks off and you start discovering these things. Now, I've actually been hearing a lot of people talk about not liking this addition to the game. They wanted him to stay a silent protagonist. But for me, someone who's a sucker for a good story, and as much as I do like Isaac Clarke, it was really great to see him get so many extra lines and actually have a personality in the game. And imagine my surprise upon starting the game. I mean, there's even sections of the game where you run out of ammo and Isaac starts cussing out the weapon, just as you would in real life. There's so many little touches like that. It makes just makes for tons of great surprises. And it's just fun. It's great. Now what follows is a small example.
Fuck. Leave it to fucking CEC, you piece of shit! You fucking piece of shit.
See what I mean? He says what you're thinking. It's fantastic. Nodes are still required for upgrades, and they're still pretty easy to spot, and they're usually accessible. And they're also still in their small little blue junction boxes attached to all the damn walls up and down the ship. A small detail now is you actually need security access to access some of these nodes, and also some doors. So that's a good touch, because it also encourages exploration and backtracking. You got some doors with level 1 clearance, 2, 3. I've even seen some that have a master clearance, but I haven't gotten far enough to be able to open those. I assume it's something in New Game Plus. Now, as far as weapons go, all the classics are there. Plasma cutter, of course, flamethrower, line gun, etc. Only now you find them organically as you play through the game, as opposed to Dead Space 2008, where you actually need to purchase the weapons using blueprints from the store. It's a very nice addition. Not only lore friendly, but you're saving space money. It's pretty nice. And now while we're on the subject of weapons, another addition will be the specialized node slots. While playing, you can find upgrades for your weapons, as well as buy these upgrades in the store, that once taken to a bench will unlock extra perks. And these perks will display on your actual blueprint for your weapon once you're in the bench. They'll appear as extra yellow nodes, and they'll access special abilities such as damage over time, melee having a chance to knock over enemies straight to the ground, which is, it's another great idea. It keeps the gunplay and resource management fresh, as you're always debating with yourself where to put the next node, or if you should spend the money and just buy some more. Overall, the game does a great job of being a remake. Its classic gameplay is still intact with enough additions and quality of life changes to make it feel new. As I love to say, it's the Dead Space equivalent of the Resident Evil 1 remake. See, I see you thinking. Yep. You know what I'm getting at. So, moving on to controls. And oddly enough, probably one of my favorite things to discuss about Dead Space 2023. Well, upon booting up Dead Space 2023 for the first time, you're given a ton of options, and we'll get back to the controls here in a second. In the gameplay section, you're given more control over your experience, even more for the controls as well, including sprint toggle, which is one of my favorite options for the game. And those worried about wearing out their controllers, it sets your sprint as a toggle on and off instead of click to hold. Display and graphics, pretty self-explanatory. Motion blur, always nice and low. Thank you very much. Audio, once again, self-explanatory. Language and subtitles, though, which is fantastic for those of us like myself who are hard of hearing. I myself actually have some damage in my inner right ear due to an ear infection from a couple years back. So these extra options that are given are absolutely great. We're talking font sizes, background, speaker names, it's all great stuff. Now, the accessibility gets a bit crazy. It's a great thing in 2023 to see so much more accessibility available to all gamers. I mean, after all, we're one big community, right? And the more of us that are able to play and enjoy this game, the better. There's even a disturbing scene warning, which is a new thing. It actually pops up in the upper right corner to let you know that there is a disturbing scene coming up. And if you want to take it a bit further, it'll actually let you blur the incoming gory scene. You can even step into the scene and it will stay blurry until it's completed. But my friends, this is where I kind of lost it. We have a slew of controller options for once in a game. So first off, you have complete and utter controller customization. You can actually pick the button for every single button and what you want them to do. This used to be way more available in other games because I know myself, I have a very hard time with Resident Evil 4 on PS4, for example. X and square should not be flipped, and by saying that, I mean that square should not be approved and X should not be reload. Ever. I actually had to go into the PS5's controller accessibility options where you can manually set your controller buttons, and I had to flip them myself. Made the game a lot more playable in my opinion. I'm just old and I'm used to classic Resident Evil controls, and this helped me and made it feel a lot better. You know, my square was reloading and helping me run, while X remained accept. Of course, by me doing it this way with the PS5 and Resident Evil 4, the button prompts remained square and X, no matter how you flip them, but that's really just a minor complaint. But now we enter the available loadouts, a more modernized controller scheme reflecting that of Dead Space 2, the actual Dead Space 2 layout, which features a reload button, just like the modern controls, and of course, the original Dead Space 2008 controller layout. I mean, it's me. Of course, I immediately chose this option and played the entirety of the game using this layout. Even in a remake, it still feels great. It's still responsive. Sure, you get stuck on a wall here and there, and you have to reload using R2 and X, but that's really not bad at all. I was taken back to 2008 and had a blast using these controls. And of course, at the time of this recording, I have beaten the game. I have started the New Game Plus, and there's a little bit of that streaming on my Twitch on the finale part of my Dead Space playthrough. And on this, the New Game Plus playthrough, I will be using the modernized controls, and from what I've played so far, it feels fantastic. It's a lot less tanky, it's a bit smoother, and having a dedicated reload button is always fantastic. You wouldn't think there'd be a huge difference using the modern controls versus the classic 2008 controls, but honestly, they're both great in their own right. Sure, one is more tanky than the other. The buttons are a little bit more clumsy in the classic. The reload just feels great just because there is a dedicated reload button. But ultimately, they're both fantastic. I recommend them both. So I guess it's about time to discuss difficulty, right? Yeah, let's move on. So of course, difficulty. This should actually be pretty quick, to be honest. I don't have a lot to say about it. But what I do have to say is that they're all great in my opinion. So let me go ahead and read off their descriptions. Story. Isaac deals much more damage, takes much less damage, and his oxygen tank lasts much longer. Isaac also heals automatically, and enemy grappling attacks are much easier to escape. This is a great starting point for those not familiar with Dead Space and just want the story. Drop in, start hacking away, and just have a blast. For those who may experience more stress and anxiety with horror games, but still want to play, this is for you. Easy. Isaac deals more damage and takes less damage, and his oxygen tank lasts somewhat longer. Enemy grappling attacks are somewhat easier to escape. Of course, a step up from story. I'd say more if you want to worry about your resource management and health, but still want to be able to play without worrying too much. This is also another great starting point. medium. Enemies and Isaac both take baseline damage. I always recommend to everyone to start here. If you're used to games such as Resident Evil 4, but you're new to Dead Space, this is where you want to go. Hard. Isaac takes much more damage. Enemies take much less damage. Now for my money, hard is the definitive Dead Space experience. Your resource management skills are paramount. You better find every node you can, upgrade your suit first, try not to suffocate when you're in spacewalking. It can be seriously fucking stressful playing this mode, as I found myself multiple times in a bind without ammo, health, and just not being equipped to deal with the challenge in front of me. But damn if it didn't feel great to overcome that challenge and make some progress afterward. Now, this is the description for Impossible mode. A special challenge mode. Completing it will earn a unique suit and weapon. This mode has the same damage setting as hard difficulty, but autosaves are disabled. Only one save slot is available, and you have one life. Dying prompts a full restart, or continuing on hard difficulty. Yeah, we don't talk about Impossible mode. Moving on to graphics. Now this is going to be short and sweet. For what the game is, it's an absolutely amazing remake. Like I said, there's not a ton to say. The game is absolutely gorgeous. You got your volumetric fog, shadows, flickering lights that put Doom to shame, pitch black rooms where your flashlight is the only thing guiding you, modern day visuals, 60 frames per second, 4K, all that mess. Whether you're in performance mode or quality mode, you're going to have an amazing time. So that about brings us to the final section here in this little review. Do I recommend it? Well, I did have my doubts when this was first announced, being that it's a beloved classic. Early gameplay footage of his animations and whatnot had me pretty damn worried. Hearing it wasn't the original team, but the remnants of what EA had bought and created, it being helmed by Motive. But goddamn was I wrong. For a diehard Dead Space fan, it's an absolute must. Yes, it's $70. For the amount of care that was given to this game, not to mention the New Game Plus and replay value, I'd say it about evens out. For newcomers who've heard of Dead Space over the years, but for some reason or another have never played it, being that it's on Game Pass and super easy to get a hold of, or you just were maybe too young when it came out. I was fucking 23, god damn it. This game is a fucking must. So I guess I'll go ahead and tack this on to the episodes where we hit the end and I just start talking. No script. So I was drastically wrong about my initial impressions of those first trailers, like I said before. There's so much care, there's so much fucking detail. All the freshness, I guess is the best word to put it. All the extra nodes, like just everything. See, like I'm having trouble pinpointing one thing. Every little thing this team did came out great. They knew they had big shoes to fill, and they delivered. Even at the time of this recording, I'm actually going to be streaming in about an hour. I'm going to go back and I'm going to be doing New Game Plus because I'm going to keep playing it because there's a gun or two that I might have missed. There's doors I still need to open. I want to see how I do that. The game very much does encourage exploration. You know, like now the trans system, probably something I forgot to mention, which I know I did. The game isn't linear anymore. It opens up and you can actually backtrack and go back to previous areas of the game using the tram system, where it's not level to level anymore. It very much feels and transitions like Dead Space 2, chapter to chapter while you're playing it. It doesn't stop to load. It doesn't stop to do a new level like it did in the past. So it's great. I personally recommend it. I couldn't recommend it enough. I know it's $70, but I mean, hell, even if you gotta wait for a little bit of a drop, get it. If you're a big fan of survival horror and sci-fi, get it. I don't think you will be disappointed. Alright everybody, so that's going to do it for this first little review of mine. Hope it laid things out, was simple enough and clear for everybody. Hell, it might even help a few people out there make a choice to buy it or not. So I want to let everybody know that I've been streaming on Twitch for just about a year now, give or take. And I was playing Dead Space 23 and decided why the hell not. Let's make a review. And here we are. You're now listening to this outro. This game is much more than a fresh coat of paint. It's a love letter to survival horror and its fans who stuck around through the ups and downs of the genre along the way. So moving forward, I'll be playing games on stream, and if I feel so inclined upon completion, whether it be a classic or a modern game, I'll be making a review for it, so stay tuned. Be gentle though. And check me out on Twitch at Windokov, Instagram at Windokov, WINDOKOV. My TikTok is Dr. Windo, DOKTORWINDO. And my Discord, where I post more about upcoming streams and any updates that I may need to tell you about, will be in the link below. So thanks for everybody for listening, and I'll see you kids around.